Greetings, friends. Time for another in other news. And sorry for the hiatus. Of course, it's summertime now. Got a little lazy there at the end of the semester. And we're getting full-fledged into summertime here, which means summer school's starting up. So I will continue to do some podcast if those viewers are out there who would like to see continued analysis from the professor perspective during the summer. Just hit me up, of course, as always. The story that finally brought me out of hiding at the end of the semester to talk about did make the news here and there, but of course they completely missed the point, as all American news sources do, and that is, did anybody hear about the Putin diss? Vladimir Putin dissed the United States by saying that he's not going to come to the G-8 meeting that's being hosted here in the United States, I believe on May 18th and May 19th. Yes, it's a fascinating story, but for all the wrong reasons it was reported. Yeah, it's a diss, but it actually is speaking to a much bigger principle that I've been talking about for some time that I'd like to elaborate on right now, for those that are interested. Let's call this one, Putin leans east by dissing the West. Ooh, little east-west action. For those of you that have been in my classes or read anything I've ever done concerning Russia, this comes as no great surprise. Why is it happening right this second, and why this particular diss? And it does have a little bit of a taste of an outright slap in the face to the United States. I'm not going to lie, but that's not really the main push behind all this. There's a couple of very distinct reasons that we want to talk about. Before we get to the diss itself, how is it that Vladimir Putin is doing this? Well, unless you've been hiding under a rock in northern Siberia, in which case you'd be dead, you know that Vladimir Putin, the main man, the Russian man of action, one Vladimir Putin, has reassumed the presidency in Moscow on May 6th. That was just 2 weeks ago? Is that 2 weeks? No, last week. It's been in office 1 week. I'm sorry, May 7th. May 7th, he took over his presidency. Of course, he served as Russia's president from 2000 to 2010. 2008. 4-year terms, a 4-year term limit, just like it is in the United States. Then he was prime minister from 2009 to 2012. Then they changed the constitution to reallow him to run for now a 6-year term. So Vladimir Putin is president of Russia again for the next 6 years. And you already know the cast of characters because they haven't changed that much. They just changed positions. Dmitry Medvedev, who I really like. I know I'm sorry for the anti-Russian crowd out there, but I think Medvedev is a pretty solid dude. He has stepped down from the presidency and become the prime minister. As was predicted by all, the two men swapped the two top titles in Russia. This is the dynamic Russian duo. I've called them that for years. They're going to be in power for at least another 6 years, possibly decade and beyond. Now, why this diss? Okay, he's only been in office for a week. Why would he, on his first move? In fact, right after he got into office, his kind of inauguration speech, he kind of slammed the U.S. a little bit and said, hey, we're going to continue our hardline stance against the missile defense and American aggression and blah, 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 blah. But at the same time, I think the next day, Putin made a statement, something to the effect of, oh, yeah, we want to, try to rebuild U.S.-Russian relations, which Dmitry Medvedev had attempted to do for 4 years. And we want to have the reset button pushed again for U.S.-Russian relations. But it didn't amount to much because approximately 3 or 4 days later, just a couple of days ago, he came out with the G8 diss. The G8 summit, the group of 8, the gigantic richest 8 countries in the world. Oh, wait a minute. Richest 8 democratic countries in the world. Oh, wait a minute. Richest democratic countries in the world that are part of Team West. And that's why he dissed it. All right, first and foremost, the G8 is becoming increasingly nonsensical. I'm sorry, I live in Team West. I'm in the epicenter of Team West here in the United States. But this concept that this group of 8 nations is somehow going to get together to shape global economic policy is, as every day passes, more and more nonsense. For those of you that are not in the know, the G8... I'm not going to go through the whole history, but you know the big G8 players. It's the United States, Canada, power player, sorry Canucks, U.S., Canada, France, Germany, the United Kingdom, who am I missing? Italy, Italy's getting ready to go bankrupt. In Japan, that was the group of 7. And then you added Russia, that was the group of 8. What are those 7 countries, even those 8 countries, going to get together to try to figure out how they're going to shape world economic policy? They're not even the primary players anymore. Let me take that back. Of course, the U.S. is. Of course, Germany is. But France? Italy? Italy's getting ready to go broke. The UK's going broke. What is this entity going to do collectively to shape anything? And the answer is not much. So first and foremost, I think, why is Vladimir Putin saying, I'm not even coming to this meeting? By the way, you know, the U.S. is hosting it, so that's kind of a big deal. Richest economy on planet Earth, hosting the G8. Vladimir Putin says, I'm not even going to come. And all the heads of state were going to come. This was going to be a big one. Not just the finance ministers, the big boys, the president and prime ministers. Vladimir Putin already said, no, I'm not doing it. Now, again, is he doing this to slap the United States in the face? Possibly. And I'll get to some of that more here in just a minute. But I think it's more... him and everybody else is increasingly saying, what good is this going to do? What, you guys going to sit down and decide what's going to happen without including China or India or Brazil? I mean, come on, what's the point? These are interesting economic times. And the idea that a bunch of the richest, whitest countries are going to be able to solve problems or really shape anything. And we're talking just shape. There's no... perception anymore that this group of 8 is going to get together and affect policy that will change the world. Nonsense. It's increasingly kind of a joke that they're going to get together to try to form a policy that may affect anything without Brazil, without China. What? So I think that's the basis for this, is Vlad the man is saying, I don't really think that much of that group anymore. Russia only joined it about 15 or 16 years ago whenever the USSR collapsed. So maybe it's just time that they just give up. He is going to send his main man, Medvedev, but it is kind of an embarrassment for the United States because they had actually changed the place that the meeting was going to occur just to make sure that Putin would come, and he dissed them anyway. More on the meeting change in just a minute. Now, this is a double diss, quite frankly, of Putin not coming to this meeting. He thinks the G8 is probably not that important anymore. I agree with him. He is going to meet with President Obama. He was going to have a separate meeting with President Obama at the sidelines of the G8 summit, by the way. But he's already said, oh, no, we'll still have that one-on-one meeting, but we're going to do it at the G20 meeting in Mexico, which is occurring in late June. Boyer's talked about this in the past, too. G8, not such a big deal. G20, much bigger deal. The 20 biggest economies on planet Earth. That includes other players from other parts of the planet, like China, India, Brazil, Indonesia, Mexico, South Africa, Saudi Arabia. Yes, this is an entity that perhaps when they do get together can make real policy that all 20 would agree on that would very much so affect the rest of planet Earth. So Putin's pulling his eggs out of the G8 basket, putting them in the G20 basket. I think it's kind of a wise move on his part. Also, Putin is saving his first date for China. And this is, again, no big mystery here. He doesn't want to, he's been in office a week. He doesn't want his first official head of state meeting to be in the United States, which would be seen as a sign of weakness, perhaps even by Russian people. And is the future of Russia, especially their economy, in the United States? I don't know that the Russians even trade much with the United States. Their obvious future is over in China. So Putin is saving his first dance as president again for China. And he's going to meet with Hu Jintao and the whole Chinese Funky Bunch crew at the beginning of June. Again, a little elbow to the United States, possibly, but it just makes practical economic sense. I mean, if I was Russia, if I was the Russian economy, I'm really not so sure I'd be concerned with what the United States thought at all. I'd be very much more concerned with what China thinks, since they're a much huger trading partner to Russia. So, again, no surprises there. This is, again, the title of my whole little spiel here. This double diss by Putin is really reflecting their lean towards the East. They're not declaring war on the West. Don't get me wrong. It's not an animosity relationship, we hope, with the West. But the future for Russia is in the East. They've made this abundantly clear. Vladimir Putin himself has made this abundantly clear for 10 years. Actually, 12 years since he's been in the public eye. And what do I mean by this? Well, he has actually just last year proposed a Eurasian Economic Union. He's trying to build an entity that's not Europe, that's not the European Union. It's a Eurasian Union with Russia at the center that will include Eastern European countries and Ukraine and Central Asian countries like Kazakhstan. So that's where he has openly said he wants to focus on. Then you have that other entity that I hope you know about, the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, that includes Russia and China as the foundation stones of, that includes Central Asian states. So this is no secret. Vladimir Putin has been saying this for over a decade, that he wants to lean eastward. G8, not so much. G20, more so on the global stage, but Eurasian Economic Union and SCO, that's where he's been headed and continues to at the expense of the United States. But I said this was a double diss, and let's get back to that. It is. You know, maybe it's just economic sense that Putin says, no, I don't care about the G8, I care about all these other things more. True. But there also is a political jab in here as well, and this really is, this blowing off of the G8 is a Putin political power play, a geopolitical power play by Putin. Say that 10 times fast. For sure, and there's no mistake about this either. This openly, I'm not coming to America, I ain't coming to your G8 meeting, was an open slap towards the U.S., particularly with NATO. This is old news as well, but it's worth retrenching. Vladimir Putin, for 12 years since he's been in the public eye in Russia, has openly and adamantly opposed the U.S. NATO missile defense shield in Eastern Europe. He's made threats. He's promised to retarget missiles. Maybe they did retarget missiles. They've raged. They've ranted. It's been the sticking point that by the time of the end of the second Vladimir Putin presidency from 2004 to 2008. By 2008, this was the one thing that had completely trashed and ruined relations between the United States and Russia. There were other things too, but this was the main sticking point that Vlad was always pissed about. And again, for those of you not in the know, the missile defense shield, it's all in Eastern European countries that are kind of near Russia, and it's a system that's supposed to, using radar and missiles, intercept incoming missiles and use their NATO missiles to shoot down the other missiles. Russia, for over a decade, has said that this is a Cold War relic, that it's isolating Russia, that it's neutralizing Russian offensive capabilities, which was kind of the basis for the whole Cold War staying cold. So Russia has forever seen this as an attack on Russia. NATO, specifically the United States, the entire time has said nonsense. We're not trying to target and neutralize Russia. We're not trying to isolate Russia. This is all about Iran. So you can go see other podcasts and other stuff that I've written about talking about that in greater detail. However, we're talking about this G8 meeting. So how did the missile defense crap come back up with a G8 diss by Vladimir Putin? That has something to do with how the meeting got changed. The meeting was originally supposed to be May 18th, May 19th of this month, in a week, was supposed to take place in Chicago. C-Town, baby! Love me some Chicago. Greatest city in the interior United States. Well, who cares about that? What's the meeting, venue got to do with why Vladimir Putin wasn't going to come? Oh, because it's a gigantic coincidence, maybe not, NATO was having a gigantic meeting at the same time. Where? In C-Town, Chicago. There was going to be basically an overlapping G8 and NATO, bigwig NATO summit happening in Chicago. Boy, the police presence there is going to be fun. And obviously, because Vladimir Putin personally has had problems with NATO his entire career, specifically the missile defense shield, everybody recognized right up front, oh, this is going to be in bad taste. Putin will never come if we're having a meeting side by side that's all about stuff that pisses him off. So the Obama administration already went out of their way and said, okay, here's the deal. The NATO meeting will happen in Chicago. We're going to move the G8 summit to Maryland. I said, Camp David in Maryland? I don't know. Some presidential place in Maryland, so that there won't be any conflict. It'll be more separated. And Putin said, initially, the Putin people said, yeah, that might work. And then Putin said, psych, not going to work. Not only did he say, I'm dissing the G8 altogether, but we're also going to diss the NATO summit. We're not going to go to that as well. Russia is not a part of NATO, obviously, but usually the top brass of Russia's military are typically invited to the NATO meetings just to know, so they know what's going on, so it doesn't look too secretive and stuff like that. They're dissing them both. Not interested. This comes on the heels, my friend, of just over a week ago, just before Vladimir Putin took office. Russia's military chief of staff, kind of like the five-star general of all of Russia's armed services, he made a statement. This is before Putin took power last week. He made a statement to the effect of, by the way, just so everybody in the West knows, we are keeping on the table preemptive strike plans to blast apart U.S./NATO's missile defense shield as a preemptive measure if we were to ever come into conflict with any of you people. It's like, whoa, hey, what? The NATO people immediately came out and said, this is preposterous. The American government was like, this is uncalled for. This rhetoric, this is old Cold War rhetoric that is not needed. We're not trying to ramp up frictions between NATO and Russia. And why are you guys doing this, Russia? And a lot of other people in the world were like, dude, scratching their head going, what? They're talking about preemptive strikes? What is going on here? Are Putin and this Russia's military chief, are they just nuts? Are they crazy? Russian-style crazy, too much vodka crazy? Well, that's the way it's going to be portrayed in the Western press. It already has been. And, you got the NATO people and the U.S. people and the European people came out and said, this is crazy. This is blown out of proportions and the Russians are nuts. Really? Let me let you in on the inside track, which is what we're always doing here in other news. Are they just nuts? Because one of the things that is going to be talked about at the big NATO summit in Seatown, Chicago, is the fact that the United States and NATO, but it's the United States, is going to pony up $4 billion, billion with a B, all right, to revamp all of Europe's defense and offensive capabilities. Yeah, what a coincidence. So the U.S. is ponying up $4 billion. By the way, where's that coming from? I thought we were broke. $4 billion being ponied up to upgrade specific things. What specifically in Europe is going to be upgraded? U.S. aircraft, offensive and defensive. And also, what was that other thing they're going to upgrade? Nuclear bombs. The nuclear bomb arsenal of Europe is going to be upgraded by the United States. I'm going to give you a second to let that sink in and start to understand why the Russians have the extreme rhetoric that they have. If I was a Russian military man, I would be slightly concerned by this. If I was Vladimir Putin, I'd be more than slightly concerned by this. Yes, yes, yes. Team West are the good guys. The U.S. is the good guys. I live here. I think we're the good guys. But look at it from a Russian perspective. The U.S. and NATO are saying, oh, no, that missile defense shield, it's not about you. We would never do anything to you. Oh, by the way, we're also going to wildly upgrade our nuclear missiles in Russia while we're building the missile defense shield. I'm sorry, I got to kind of, I'm not going to say side up, but I totally empathize with the Russian reaction here, and I totally empathize with Putin's total diss of both the G8, on grounds that the G8's not worth much anymore, but also the double diss of the whole concept of NATO and this missile defense shield and the upgrade of Europe's offensive capabilities on the U.S. dime. You put all these things together, my friends, and it is no great mystery, if you know what's going on and you follow current events, it's no great mystery why President Vladimir Putin of Russia just did the boop, boop, double down, double diss on the United States when it comes to the G8, but also NATO and its proposed missile defense shield. Got it? Good. We'll see you some this summer, and tell me what you'd like to hear about next.